Okay, so I know I haven't made a video in a good while, like in a month or so. I have just been having terrible burnout when it comes to making videos and reading books and stuff like that. I do plan on making another video about this soon that you could watch. Maybe sometime later this week or next week you'll see a video on that. But for now, I just wanted to come on here to talk about a duology that I don't think is getting enough attention. I wanted specifically to talk about it today because today is the publication date of the second book in the duology. And that duology is the Light the Abyss series by London Shah. So the first book is called Light at the Bottom of the World. The new cover looks like this. And then the second book is called Journey to the Heart of the Abyss. So Light at the Bottom of the World essentially takes place in this futuristic underwater London. Essentially, the world has become totally, if not completely, submerged by water because of some sort of event that happened. The surface is no longer habitable, so humanity now has to adapt to living underwater, and so everybody lives in like these big domes and they use submarines to get around. It's a really interesting, vivid underwater sci-fi world. The main conflict of the book centers around our main character, Layla McQueen. She wins a submarine race, and because of that the government sort of gives her a lot of attention and all sorts of rewards, but she ends up becoming somewhat of a target for reasons you'll understand when you read the book, and she has to go on the run. So the book is about her, in the submarine trying to run from the bad guys, and she's also running away from these seemingly humanoid mermaid type people who can breathe water and who hate humans for some reason. So the book follows her on this journey, and I really enjoyed this story. I think the thing that I enjoyed about it the most was just a different sort of like fantastical environment. I don't really read much sci-fi, and when I do it's usually typical like outer space or futuristic Earth, and I'd never really read any sort of underwater sci-fi. I know that is a prevalent genre that a lot of people read when it comes to sci-fi, but I had never personally read anything like that before. So this was the first time I read a science fiction story that takes place in an underwater world, and nonetheless in a city like London. And I did read this book a few months after I had visited London for the first time, so it was really interesting to like sort of remember all of the places that I had visited and had seen and have to now reimagine those places underwater. The first 50 pages or so of this book is just world building, and it's done so beautifully, and I really enjoy just the descriptions of the streets and the buildings and how they have succumbed to this new underwater environment. Shah really builds a very vivid world for the reader, especially within the city of London, and I enjoyed that aspect of the book probably the most. The story is also really fun and interesting and engaging. There's lots of mysteries and questions to engage the reader, drama and plot twists, and all sorts of interesting and amazing stuff going on in this series. I also have to say that I really enjoyed reading a science fiction futuristic story that centered a Muslim character. Our main character Layla is Muslim, and she's of Afghan Pashtun descent, and it was just really interesting to see that in the context of a science fiction story, because you don't usually get that in sci-fi. You don't usually really get like futuristic stories about like religious characters, right? Because there's this sort of idea that as time progresses people will let go of religion and religion will become, absent. But this book actually makes a lot of sense. The main character uses her Islam and her religion as a means of coping, because this underwater world is extremely difficult to live in, right? It's fairly new. Like the time that this book is set in is not super duper far into the future. They're only a few generations into this like underwater living. For example, our main character, her grandfather actually remembers life on the surface, right? So all of that is to say that this whole living underwater thing is very new for a lot of humanity, and one of the things that people struggle with is something that they call seasickness, which is coded depression. Essentially, there is this intense nostalgia and longing to go back to the surface, to return back to the land, but that's not really possible, and so that's something that really affects people mentally in this new sort of underwater environment. Our main protagonist avoids seasickness by holding steadfast to her faith, and Islam and faith are not really huge themes in this story whatsoever, but you can tell that this character is like a practicing Muslim. There were points in the book where she was reading namaz, where she was praying, where she was saying inshallah and bismillah and all sorts of different things that Muslims say, and I really enjoyed seeing that, because it didn't have to be in this story, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't need to be there for the story to progress in the way that it did, but I'm really glad that the author included it there, because it really disrupted that idea that religion will become futile one day, whereas I think religion will continue to persist and hopefully evolve to suit our needs in the future. Yes, and with that being said, and the author made this note in her second book, she said that this is the first series to feature a British Muslim main character in a sci-fi, and it's also the first Western science fiction or fantasy novel to feature a lead of Pashtun ethnicity. And I think that that's really cool. There's a lot of parallels in this duology to our life today and to some of the things that we experience and go through. For example, when I was talking about the whole mermaid thing, right? The mermaids in the book are portrayed to be evil at the beginning of the book, but then as the story progresses, I don't want to spoil it too much, the main character begins to understand that these sort of mermaid type, I'm calling them mermaids, I don't think that's what they're actually called in the story, but this group of underwater humans who can actually breathe and live in the water, they're not inherently bad as much as they are misunderstood and sensationalized, and that functions as an allegory, right, for like real life groups of people who are demonized and antagonized by their wider societies. So I really appreciated that aspect of it. Now, moving on to the second book, Journey to the Heart of the Abyss. This is the second and final book in the duology. Now, I wanted to make this video sooner because I wanted to finish this book sooner. I wanted to finish it before it was published, but unfortunately I did not get around to doing that. I'm only about like 50 or so pages in, unfortunately, but I am enjoying it so far, and the first book ended on like a extreme cliffhanger, so it's really fun to be able to jump back into the story and get back into the groove of what was going on with the characters. It is taking me a while to get into it. I did mention this a couple, like in my last video a whole month ago. I was currently reading it. I had to like start it over and stuff because I just was not really in a reading mood, which is why honestly since that video I've only completed 2 more books. So honestly I haven't really been in a reading mood these past few months, and unfortunately that affected my ability to finish this book, obviously. But I do look forward to continuing on with it and seeing how Lila's story ends, and I hope it ends in a way that doesn't break my heart. So I do think that everybody should pick up the Light the Abyss duology. I think that it's not really getting a lot of hype or attention, probably due to the fact that it's sci-fi and people don't really seem to care about sci-fi as much anymore, especially the YA Sci Fi, unless like it was J. Christoph who wrote it. You will not regret it. I love it. I've talked about these books tons of times on my channel already, especially the first book, right? And a lot of people have taken my recommendation and read it and really enjoyed it. Do I think it's the best thing ever? Do I think that it's the best book that I've ever read? No, this book is kind of like a 3.5, 4-star read for me, and this one might probably also be like a 4-star read for me. It's definitely not the best of the best that's out there, but it's unique and it's fun and it's good enough, and I think that it deserves a lot more attention. So I will leave some links down below where you could go check it out on Goodreads if you want to buy the books or anything like that. If you end up reading these books because of my recommendations, definitely let me know. If you have read them and you also have thoughts on them, let me know in the comments down below as well. But that's going to be it for this really quick video. Thank you all so much for watching. I will be back soon, as I said, with another video where I will hopefully be giving you a little bit more insight as to why I haven't really been reading or making videos. But nevertheless, I hope you have a good day. Thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time, inshallah, keep reading.